You know, Elena, sometimes I feel like we're in a constant silent battle, not just against the world, but against systems, against waiting lists, against the general lack of understanding. It's for our kids, right? Kids who are just trying to navigate a world that's not really built for them.
Absolutely, Becca. And what's truly heartbreaking is when you see your child, who's already dealing with so much ADHD, ASD, and then the physical challenges of hypermobility just hit a wall. That burnout, it's not just a bad day, it's a systemic failure. It's when support arrives not just late, but often, far too late, after they've already had enough.
Exactly. And then it manifests, right? For so many kids like my own, it turns into this crippling school based anxiety. They've spent years masking, trying to fit in, pushing past their sensory sensitivities, ignoring their physical discomfort, and then suddenly their bodies and minds just say, no more, we can't do this anymore. The school becomes this impossible hurdle, not a place of learning.
It's like they've been running a marathon, but everyone expects them to sprint, and when they eventually collapse, we're asking why they're not running. We're not looking at the years of pushing, the lack of hydration, the faulty shoes they were given. The hypermobility part is so often overlooked too, isn't it? People see the ADHD and the ASD, but don't always connect the dots to the physical pain or fatigue that comes from constantly overextending joints or needing more energy just to hold themselves upright.
Oh, completely. My child, for example, they'd come home absolutely shattered, not just mentally, but physically. They'd been sitting in chairs that weren't supportive, constantly adjusting, or trying to manage their fidgeting without drawing attention, which is exhausting when you have ADHD. And then the sensory overload from the classroom, the noise, the fluorescent lights, it all adds up, creating a constant state of low level stress that eventually just explodes.
It's a full body, full mind assault, really. You combine the executive function challenges of ADHD, the difficulty with planning, organization, emotional regulation, with the social communication differences and sensory sensitivities of ASD, and then you throw in the chronic pain or fatigue from hypermobility. It's a triple whammy. Each one individually is significant, but together, they create a unique and often overwhelming set of needs.
And this is where the support often comes too late, really hits hard. You spend years going to doctors, pushing for referrals, advocating at school. You know something's not right, you're seeing your child struggle, but you're constantly met with wait and see, or they'll grow out of it, or it's just a phase. By the time you finally get a diagnosis or an actual support plan, your child is already running on empty.
Exactly. You're past the point of early intervention, which is what every expert says is key. Instead, you're in crisis management mode. The child has already developed coping mechanisms that might not be healthy, or they've internalized the idea that they're bad or different because they can't keep up. The emotional damage is already done, and then you're trying to patch it up with belated support, which feels like putting a tiny bandage on a gaping wound.
And the school system, oh my goodness, you're fighting for reasonable adjustments, for an EHCP, for an understanding from teachers. And often, bless their hearts, teachers are trying their best, but they're under resourced and not always trained for this specific blend of needs. My child might look fine in class, but internally, they're battling sensory overload, trying to process instructions that are too fast, and their joints ache. It's a silent struggle that isn't visible on the surface.
And that invisibility is a huge part of the problem. If a child has a visible physical disability, people are quicker to understand and accommodate. But neurodevelopmental conditions, especially when compounded with something like hypermobility, are often dismissed because the child looks fine. You get the, well, they were fine yesterday, or they're just being naughty comments. It's infuriating because you know the internal effort required for them to simply exist in that environment is monumental.
And then the school based anxiety kicks in. It's not just, I don't want to go to school today. It becomes a full blown panic attack at the thought of the school gate, physical symptoms like stomach aches or headaches, absolute meltdowns. It's their body's way of saying, I literally cannot go back to that place that overstimulates me, exhausts me, and makes me feel inadequate. And then you're stuck because school is compulsory, but your child is genuinely unable to attend.
It's a truly awful catch-22. The system demands attendance, but the system itself has created an environment that's actively harming the child. And for parents, it's a constant tightrope walk. You want to support your child, you understand their distress, but you're also navigating truancy laws, social services, and the judgment of others. It's emotionally draining, and often financially draining too, trying to find private solutions when public ones fail.
That's a huge point, the financial aspect. Even if you manage to get a diagnosis, the therapies often come with a hefty price tag. Occupational therapy, physiotherapy for hypermobility, specialised tutoring, mental health support for the anxiety. It all adds up so quickly. We're talking about thousands. And that's where something like disability living allowance, or DLA, can be a lifesaver if you can get it. It's meant to help cover those extra costs a child has because of their disability or condition.
Exactly. Many people don't even realize DLA exists for children. It's not about income or savings, it's about the extra daily care and mobility needs. If your child needs more help with personal care than a child their age without a disability, or has difficulty getting around, that's what it's for. It can be a real game changer for families, allowing them to afford those private therapies, or make adaptations at home, or even just pay for taxis when school transport isn't suitable due to anxiety or sensory issues. But even applying for DLA is a massive undertaking, isn't it?
Oh, it's an absolute beast. The forms are incredibly detailed, asking for evidence of how their conditions affect them. And it's not just do they have ADHD, it's how does their ADHD affect their ability to feed themselves, to dress, to communicate, to participate in activities that a typical child of their age would. You have to practically document every struggle, every meltdown, every extra minute of care you provide. It feels like you're proving your child is suffering, which is a horrible thing to have to do.
And you have to explain how the different conditions interact, how the hypermobility means they can't sit still comfortably, which exacerbates the ADHD fidgeting, or how the sensory processing issues from ASD make dressing themselves a battle, not just because of ADHD executive function, but because certain textures are unbearable. You're detailing a complex interplay of needs that many professionals don't even fully grasp, let alone a form assessor.
And the irony is, by the time you're often desperate enough to apply for DLA, your child is usually in that burnout phase or heavily anxious, and you, the parent, are probably exhausted and emotionally spent. Filling out those forms correctly, gathering all the evidence, chasing medical professionals for supporting letters, it's another full-time job on top of everything else. It truly feels like the system is designed to make it as hard as possible, which means many families who desperately need it never get it or give up.
It reinforces that feeling of being completely isolated and unsupported. You're fighting for your child's basic right to an education, to well-being, to a life without constant struggle. And then you're also fighting the system that's supposed to be there to help. It's like you're in a boxing match where your opponent has 2 extra arms and you're blindfolded.
So what's the solution? I mean, for individual families going through this and on a broader systemic level, because it feels like we're just putting out fires all the time instead of preventing them from starting.
I think for individual families, it's about connecting with others, finding those communities online or in person where you feel seen and understood. Sharing strategies, even just venting, can be incredibly validating, and learning to advocate fiercely for your child even when you're tired. Document everything, keep detailed records, and don't be afraid to challenge decisions. Knowing your rights, what support should be available, and understanding things like DLA can empower you.
That's so true. It's knowing you're not alone and remembering that your child isn't refusing to go to school. They're often physically and emotionally unable to go. That reframing helps you meet them with empathy rather than frustration, because when they've burned out, when the anxiety takes over, they need more understanding, not more pressure. They need a safe harbour to recover, not another battleground.
And systemically, we desperately need earlier identification and intervention, better training for teachers and healthcare professionals across the board so they can spot these complex needs sooner, integrated services so families aren't left to piece together a patchwork of support from different departments, and a greater recognition that these conditions don't exist in silos, they interweave and impact each other significantly. And funding, of course, to make all of that possible.
Yes, absolutely. Funding for more educational psychologists, more specialist teachers, more access to therapies without years-long waiting lists. because what we're talking about isn't just about making life easier for these kids. It's about giving them a chance to thrive, to learn, to develop their potential without being constantly weighed down by exhaustion and anxiety. It's about a future.
It truly is, because if we keep waiting until they've had enough and burned out, we're not just failing individual children, we're failing a generation. We're setting them up for a lifetime of mental health struggles, underemployment, and feeling like they don't belong. It's a preventable tragedy that happens far too often.
And the parents too. We need support, we need to be heard. We're often the first ones to notice, the ones fighting tooth and nail, and yet we're often treated like we're overreacting or just difficult. Acknowledging the parental burnout is crucial because we can't pour from an empty cup, right? We can't fight for our kids effectively if we're completely depleted.
Precisely. Parental well-being is intrinsically linked to child well-being in these situations. It's a holistic issue that requires a holistic response, not just a reactive one when things are at breaking point. We need to shift from crisis management to preventative, compassionate care, for our children and for us, the parents on the front lines.
It really comes down to empathy, doesn't it? Understanding that a child experiencing school-based anxiety due to these complex needs isn't being difficult, they're in distress, and they need understanding, not punishment. They need a system that supports them, not one that pushes them to breaking point. And that starts with us, advocating and sharing our stories.
Couldn't agree more, Becca. It's a tough journey, but knowing we're not alone and that our voices can contribute to change, that's what keeps us going. Hopefully, our conversation today helps even one family feel a little less isolated and a little more empowered.
I really hope so. Thank you for sharing your insights, Elena. It's always so good to talk through these things.
You too, Becca. And to all our listeners, keep fighting the good fight. Your children are worth every single effort. Take care, everyone.